Hi, I'm Lorraine. At my brother's wedding, my mom raised her glass, smiled wide, and announced to the entire room, "Too bad you're still alone at 36. Everyone laughed, except me. I didn't cry, I didn't shout, I just sipped my champagne. And later, dropped the photo that changed everything. But why would a mother humiliate her daughter like that? Publicly, purposefully, and with a smile. Have you ever felt like your own family turned you into a side character in their story? Have you ever been the invisible one at the table you helped set? What time are you watching this? And where are you tuning in from? Can you relate to being the forgotten child? I'd love to hear your story. Drop it in the comments. The chairs were white, the florals were blush and sage, and the sky above Asheville didn't dare rain. Everything about my brother's wedding felt like a page torn from a magazine labeled Rustic Luxury. Chase looked like the lead in a Hallmark movie, and Emma was exactly the kind of girl our mother always said a man should marry. I walked in alone. That wasn't unusual. I'd been walking into family events alone for over a decade now, though each time came with its own little sting. I wore the dark green dress I picked carefully, not too loud, not invisible either. My heels clicked against the stone pathway as I made my way to the seating chart. Table 7, next to Thomas Brandt. My breath caught for just a second. Thomas, high school sweetheart. Not in reality, just in my own one-sided teenage narrative. He'd asked to borrow my notes once, smiled in a way that haunted me for years, then ignored me completely at prom. Now he sat beside his wife, a blonde woman in a pale blue dress, laughing quietly. I swallowed the taste of 17. Maybe the placement was random, but I knew better. My mother never left these details to chance. I slid into my seat, nodded politely at Thomas and his wife. She offered me a kind smile, the kind reserved for distant cousins or polite strangers. I nodded again and focused on the centerpiece. Champagne was poured. Our mother, Dolores, stood with grace only decades of social dominance could teach. She raised her glass. The room hushed. "To Chase and Emma," she said, her voice perfectly pitched, polished. A beautiful match. A reminder that some people just find their person. She paused, eyes scanning the room. "And too bad," she added, her smile thin and knowing. "Some of us are still alone at 36. Silence. Then that awful low ripple of polite laughter. The kind people let out when they don't know whether to cringe or nod along. I didn't move, didn't blink. I raised my glass, met her eyes and drank. One long, slow sip. Not to toast them, but to toast myself. For not standing up, for not throwing the glass, for not letting her win. The DJ switched songs. The crowd went back to chatting, chewing, dancing, as if nothing had just happened. But something had. Inside me, something finally clicked, not snapped. Snapping is loud. This was quieter, a soft, steel-like shift. I excused myself from the table and walked outside. The air was cool, not cold enough to bite, but enough to remind you that fall was near. I stood under one of the string lights, hands gripping the wooden railing, and stared out into the garden like I might find the version of myself I'd lost in there. All the birthdays she skipped, all the boyfriends she belittled until I pushed them away. All the time she called her judgments advice. I wasn't angry, not in the way you throw plates or scream at the stars. I was tired. And strangely clear. This wasn't new. It was just louder tonight. "They still think I'm alone," I whispered, looking up at the darkening sky. "That's cute." I pulled my phone from my clutch, opened my photo gallery, scrolled past screenshots, grocery lists, notes to self, and there it was. One photo, the one Tanya took on the beach. My hair was blowing wildly, my smile was real, and my bare feet dug into the sand next to a man whose hand held mine like we'd always known how. I stared at it, then tapped and held my finger on the screen. Save to favorites. The sun dipped slowly behind the pines, casting gold over the backyard just as the string lights flickered on. I had spent most of the day running between tables and the kitchen, making sure the ice didn't melt, and the slideshow worked on the old projector screen Dad used to haul out for summer movies. It was my mother's 60th. She wanted something modest but meaningful, which in Dolores speak meant rustic chic mason jar vases, monogrammed napkins, and a 5-tier cake that looked like it belonged on television. I handled all of it. The RSVP list, the gluten-free options, the seating chart she never double-checked. Chase arrived late as usual, walked in with Emma on his arm and received applause like a celebrity arriving fashionably. No one noticed I was already there. When the guests were full and buzzed, Dolores stood under the arch we'd strung with fairy lights. She tapped her glass. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight," she began, eyes scanning the crowd. This is a blessing." She started listing names: the pastor, her childhood friend from Raleigh, the neighbor who helped rake the yard, then Chase. "My son," she said, beaming, "who always shows up, who always makes me proud." I watched her face, waiting. My wine glass felt heavy in my hand. She moved on. "And of course, Emma," she added, "like the daughter I never had." That was the moment. Not a scream, not a slap, just a quiet slash across the chest. So smooth, so rehearsed you almost didn't bleed. I didn't say a word, just took a sip of wine and smiled like I was watching a stranger's mother give a speech. Then she reached under the table and pulled out a box. Small, velvet. She handed it to Chase in front of everyone. "You've made me the proudest mother in this town," she said. Her voice rose just enough. "This is for the man who built something." Chase looked stunned, then embarrassed. "Mom, come on." But she waved him off, laughing. "You deserve it, you always do." The watch glinted in the light. People clapped. I did too, softly, one hand under the table, fingers trembling. "So this is what it takes to be seen," I whispered. Not to anyone but the breeze. That night, after the plates were cleared and the slideshow faded into darkness, I took home the leftover cupcakes. No one asked if I wanted any. I just packed them quietly while people hugged and buzzed around Chase. At home, I set the box down and opened my laptop. There's a folder on my desktop labeled "Things I Never Shared." It's where I keep the parts of myself that don't survive the living room. Poems, unsent letters, photos. I clicked and dragged one more file into it. A photo of me on the beach, wind in my hair, dress tangled at my calves, laughing like I wasn't hiding. I renamed the folder, "When I'm Ready." It was a Sunday, 5 years ago. Late afternoon, just after church let out, and long before the sky remembered it was winter. I brought David home for dinner. He was soft-spoken, kind, taught 11th grade history, and once spent an hour telling me why the War of 1812 was misunderstood. His hands were always warm, like he was built to be someone's comfort. Dolores answered the door, gave him one long look from shoes to shoulders and said, "Oh, you're the one." It wasn't warm. It wasn't mean. It was simply judgment passed. Dinner was polite, the kind of polite that feels sharp around the edges. She asked him questions, all about money and ambition wrapped in casual phrases like, "Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" and "Still renting, huh?" After dessert, she asked me to walk him out, alone. That night, she folded her napkin with surgical precision and said, "He seems sweet, but not for this family." I remember every word. A man should earn more than a teacher's salary. He doesn't look steady enough. I just don't want you to settle. I tried to defend him, but my voice felt like a suggestion. Hers was the law. 3 days later, David ended it. We sat on my couch, the same one I still have, and he said, "I don't think your mom likes me, and I'm not strong enough to fight that." I didn't cry, I didn't beg, I just nodded. But something inside me packed up and left that night, and I don't think it ever came back. Now here we are again. Backyard BBQ, string lights, mason jars with sweet tea, Dolores wearing the apron I bought her 2 Christmases ago and acting like she always loved it. A banner stretched across the porch. "Welcome, Emma, future Mrs. Darnell." She laughed when she saw it, kissed Chase's cheek and told him his mom was adorable. I stood in the corner, beer bottle sweating in my hand, watching like I wasn't really there, like I was just a memory haunting the background of a photo someone else would frame. Emma made the rounds gracefully, said all the right things, complimented the grilled corn, thanked Dolores for the mimosa. When she got to me, she said, "I heard you're the reason this place looks so pretty." I smiled, the kind of smile you give when the lie is too big to fix. I used to make that potato salad for someone once, I said, pointing to the dish on her plate. She blinked, confused, politely laughed. I didn't elaborate. Because the truth was, it was never about whether someone was kind or stable or good to me. It was about whether they fit into her design. And David didn't. But Emma did. I looked around at the people I'd known since childhood and realized not one of them had asked me why I hadn't brought anyone. Not even once. They'd already decided I didn't have anyone worth asking about. And maybe that was true. Maybe Miles and I were a secret by choice. But it struck me just how much silence can be mistaken for absence. How easily people assume the quiet one has nothing to say. I stepped into the kitchen for air. The window caught my reflection. Shoulders hunched, eyes too tired for a 36-year-old woman who hadn't even started drinking yet. "They don't break you with fists," I whispered. "They erase you with smiles." My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message, unsent, stared back at me. Still blank, but maybe not for much longer. I was 27 when I filled out the application. It was past midnight in my studio apartment in Charlotte, the kind of night where the silence hums louder than any song. I had 2 tabs open, one with the MFA programs page, the other with a Word document titled Personal Statement, Final. I had just finished the last sentence. It felt right, brave even. The next morning, I called my mother. I don't know why, I wasn't asking for permission, or maybe I was, deep down. She listened in that half-attentive way of hers, then said, "You're not a teenager anymore, Lorraine. Dreams don't pay the bills." That night, I closed the tabs. I didn't hit submit. I deleted the draft, not in a dramatic flair, but in the quiet, surgical way you remove something you no longer believe you deserve. I didn't tell anyone, especially not Miles. Back then, we weren't even we yet. I just folded the dream down like paper and tucked it somewhere out of reach. It wasn't until last week that the memory came back. I was watching an interview with a woman who'd published her first book at 49. She said, "I didn't get braver. I just got tired of asking for permission." That's when it hit me. I never even tried. Not because I wasn't good enough, but because I let someone talk me out of believing I ever could be. I opened my writing samples folder. Most files hadn't been touched in years. Titles like unsubmitted_final and donatred_V2. Each one a little version of me that almost lived. I scrolled through them slowly, like flipping pages of a diary you're scared to own. That betrayal, my mother's, was never loud. It didn't yell or slam doors. It whispered, "Be practical." It wore a smile while it trimmed your ambition down to what could fit in a polite dinner conversation. Later that afternoon, I was sipping tea when I opened Facebook, and there it was, a post from Dolores, front and center. "So proud of my son's talent, real gift in the family." Attached was a screenshot of Chase's blog, reposted by a small-town newsletter, probably automated. Nothing major, but it had likes, comments, applause. The word gift burned, like it had skipped me on purpose. I once won a statewide fiction contest. I had a short story published in a literary journal the year I turned 29. I showed her the magazine. She flipped to the page, skimmed a few lines, then said, "Dark stuff. Is this healthy for you to write?" That was all. I never brought it up again. Never wrote anything I dared to finish. I wasn't told to stop. I was just never invited to continue. That's the thing no one tells you. Silence can shape you more than rejection. I minimized Facebook, went back to my folders, and for the first time in years, I renamed one. Things I'll publish when I'm ready. Then I opened a blank document, typed the first line, "This isn't a story, this is a record." I stood in the doorway of my living room, fingers tightening around my house key like I still couldn't believe it fit the lock. The house smelled like new paint and old pine, the kind of scent that reminded you of both arrival and history. When I called to tell my mother I'd closed on the place, I expected, maybe foolishly, a moment of pride. Instead, there was a pause on the line, then a soft laugh. "Just yours?" she said. "That sounds a little lonely, doesn't it?" I brushed it off at the time, told myself she didn't mean it that way. But that's how she always did it. Her judgment came gift-wrapped in concern, and by the time you realized you'd been insulted, It was too late to object without sounding dramatic. No one came by that first night. No text from Chase, no flowers from Dolores, not even a comment in the family group chat. I unpacked my dishes in silence, made a cup of tea, and sat on a cardboard box pretending it was a sofa. There was no toast, no welcome, just quiet. I told myself it was fine. I had done this alone, and maybe that was something to be proud of. But that silence? It wasn't passive. It had intent. Like a cold shoulder designed to remind me I had stepped outside of her plan. 3 months later, Chase bought a condo downtown. Sleek, minimalist, with a rooftop view of the city skyline. Dolores planned a housewarming party. There were banners, yes, literal banners, that read, "Future Empire starts here." A cake with frosting that spelled out, "Proud of you, son." A champagne tower. The works. I brought a bottle of red wine and stood in the corner like hired help. No one offered me a seat. Dolores stood beside Chase, holding a glass, glowing like she'd won a prize at the county fair. "This," she said, raising her glass, "is what happens when you build something. When you think ahead. When you carry the family name with pride." And I smiled. Because what else was I supposed to do? Throw the wine at the wall? I laughed under my breath, took a sip, and let it burn on the way down. Every word she said echoed like footsteps across a bridge I'd already set fire to. Later in the hallway, I overheard someone ask, "I thought she was renting." The word hit harder than I expected. They didn't ask. They didn't want to know. They'd already decided who I was, and I hadn't fought hard enough to rewrite the script. I walked into the bathroom, locked the door, and stared at myself in the mirror. My lipstick was fading. My eyes looked tired. I whispered, "I built something too." It didn't matter, because no one came to see it. When I got home that night, I pulled out a notepad, wrote in thick, dark ink, "If she diminishes me again, I won't just leave. I'll erase her too." I tore the page out, folded it in half, and slid it into the back of the drawer. The reception sparkled under fairy lights, warm tones dancing across polished wood floors and champagne glasses. If I hadn't known better, I would have thought I'd stepped into someone else's dream wedding, because it looked an awful lot like the Pinterest boards I once saved in secret. I walked in with a practiced face, calm, neutral. It took effort not to look like I was searching for something. At the welcome table, the woman in a pastel dress smiled politely. "Name?" "Lorraine Grigsby," I said. She checked her list. Her smile faltered for just a second before she handed me an envelope marked "Reserved Table 12." No name, no calligraphy, just a bland typewritten label with no warmth, no welcome. My stomach twisted. Table 12 was in the back corner of the hall, near the coat rack, and too far from the dance floor to hear the music clearly. I sat between two women who must have been pushing 80, and across from a man who taught high school with our uncle 30 years ago. One of the aunts leaned in and asked, "So, dear, are you Chase's cousin from his father's side?" I smiled. "No, I'm his sister." She blinked, then gave a polite, "Oh," and turned back to her salad. I looked down at the place card resting beside my plate. +1, if applicable. I didn't have one. And even if I did, I don't think they would have made room. I pushed the food around my plate for 20 minutes. I didn't taste any of it. I just watched. Watched Dolores glide between tables, hand on Emma's back like she was sculpting her into perfection. Watched Chase laugh too loudly at a toast he didn't hear. And then I remembered the envelope. 2 weeks earlier, I had received the invitation in the mail. I remembered how stiff it felt in my hands, how the paper lacked texture, how the font seemed like something printed by a cheap office supply store. I told myself not to read into it. Maybe it was just the style. Until I saw a photo on Facebook last night. Barbara had posted a picture of her invite, handwritten delicate script, personalized down to the ribbon seal. Mine had none of that. Mine said, "You are technically invited, but emotionally disinvited." I stood up and slipped out to the side patio. The air was cooler than expected, the night just starting to bite. I pulled out my phone and typed a message to Dolores. "Don't seat me at a table where I disappear." Then I erased it. Typed again. Message received, loud and clear. Erased that too. I stared out into the darkness, wondering how much longer I was supposed to play along with a script that had erased my character before the first act ended. When I got home, I kicked off my heels, peeled out of the dress, and sat on the couch in silence. I opened the photo album app on my phone, created a new folder, named it Things I Will Not Be Quiet About, and dragged in a photo. White dress, bare feet, a man's hand wrapped around mine, my eyes mid-laugh, my wedding, my proof, my peace. The morning sun reached across my bed like it was trying to pull me into something new. The house was still, no phones ringing, no to-do lists, just quiet. I lay there longer than usual, scrolling through old photos on my phone. My thumb stopped on the one Tanya took. Me, barefoot in the sand, veil caught midair, laughing like I had no idea how heavy the world had been. I looked at that photo for a long time. Then I tapped Share to Story, selected Close Friends. No caption, no explanation, just a single unfiltered truth. The buzz started 27 minutes later. Aunt Linda, did I miss something? Barbara, wait, what is this? Emma replied to the story with a simple, congratulations? I didn't respond, just locked my phone and sipped my coffee. The group chat began unraveling shortly after. Barbara, ever the broadcaster, screenshot the photo and blasted it into the family thread. Did Lorraine get married? Cousins began spiraling, half disbelief, half outrage. One even asked if it was AI generated. Still, I said nothing. I let the fire catch. Dolores didn't message right away, but I knew she'd seen it. Of course she had. She probably saw it before anyone else. Maybe she had been waiting for something like this to happen. Some quiet rebellion, some twist she hadn't scripted. Her message came that afternoon. If it's him, I understand why you didn't tell us. I stared at the words like they were a riddle, and then I understood. She knew. She had always known about Miles. From the beginning, the night she met him in the driveway, she'd made her decision. She filed him under not family material and buried him so deep in silence, I forgot how to speak his name around her. It wasn't that I had hidden him, it was that she'd erased him. I typed back, I didn't hide him from you. I protected him from you. I hit send without flinching. Later that evening, I sat by the fireplace, legs tucked under me, phone off. Tanya texted, but I didn't check it yet. I knew what she'd say. Something half funny, half holy. I whispered to the empty room, she doesn't own the narrative anymore. And for once, it was true. I didn't feel like a ghost in my own story. I opened my phone again, not to scroll, not to argue, but to delete every app that ever made me feel like a witness instead of a person. As I dropped the last app into the trash, someone knocked on the door. I paused, opened it. Chase stood there, dark circles under his eyes, suit jacket wrinkled like he hadn't taken it off since yesterday. Can we talk? He asked. He texted around 9. Can we talk? Just us. The kind of message that comes with no punctuation, no emotion. But it landed heavy, like something overdue. I told him to meet me at that old cafe downtown, the one with the uneven tile floor and the chipped mugs. We used to go there when we were teenagers, pretending we were adults with things to say. It was colder than I expected when I stepped outside, the kind of cold that doesn't bite right away, but seeps in slowly. He was already there when I arrived, sitting by the window, fingers around a lukewarm cup of coffee. His tie was gone, sleeves rolled, and his face looked like it had forgotten how to sleep. I sat across from him and waited. He didn't speak for a full minute. Then, without looking at me, he said, I'm tired of playing the perfect son. The words hung between us, fragile and unfinished. I've been on autopilot. The engagement, the condo, the business, all of it. His voice was low, almost apologetic. I kept the wheels turning because I thought if I stopped, she'd take it all back. I didn't move, just listened. Because this wasn't about surprise. It was about recognition. You dropped your truth, he said, finally meeting my eyes. I've been carrying a lie. And there it was. Something cracked in me, not because I didn't know, but because hearing it from him felt like someone else stepping out of the fog with the same scars. I thought I had to do it her way, he added. Secure the marriage, secure the funding, keep the plan intact. I tilted my head. And if you didn't? His jaw clenched. She told me 6 months ago. If you don't lock this down, I'm pulling the seed money. You can find love later. It felt like being back on that call at 27 when she told me dreams didn't pay the bills. That same chill in my spine, the same sentence just rewritten for a different child. This isn't about Chase versus Lorraine, I said quietly. This is about control dressed up as care. He looked down, said nothing. I spent years thinking she just didn't like me, I continued. But now I realize she never intended to see us as full people, just pieces of her own legacy. He nodded, eyes glassy, but he didn't cry. Neither did I. I reached into my bag and pulled out the photo, the one from the beach, my wedding, my choice, my moment. I slid it across the table. This is mine, I said. No one gave it to me. No one took it from me. I made it. He looked at it, fingers trembling as they brushed the edge of the print. Then he looked at me. Are you going to tell her she can't control you anymore? I smiled, soft but sure. I don't have to, I said. She'll feel it. The light came in soft that morning, filtering through the kitchen window in pale gold streaks, brushing against the coffee pot like a silent blessing. I stood barefoot on the tile floor, grounding myself in something simple, something mine. Miles sat at the breakfast table, legs folded under him, a book in one hand, the other idly tracing circles on the mug beside him. No buzzing group chat, no phone vibrating itself into exhaustion on the countertop. Just breath, just peace. I reached for my phone out of habit, thumbing through missed calls and headlines I didn't care to read. One voicemail sat waiting, from Mom. Unopened. I didn't press play. I didn't need to hear what I'd already lived. Maybe it was an apology. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was one of those long, winding monologues that sound like concern, but feel like cement. Heavy, hardening over old wounds. My thumb hovered over the message before I locked the screen and placed the phone face down. I opened the kitchen window instead. Let air in, let her out. Later that morning, a photo from Chase came in. He was standing on a trail in the Blue Ridge Mountains, arms outstretched, face to the sun like he was finally catching his breath. The caption read, "No more costumes." I smiled. A moment later, Tanya sent a link, one of those quick messages that carried a quiet nudge. Writing contest, your kind of thing, deadline next month. Miles didn't say much. He didn't need to, just kissed my shoulder as he passed behind me and murmured, "You could write it all down, or not. Either way, I'm still here." It was enough. I was choosing the voices now. That was the difference. By noon, I was setting the table for brunch. Nothing fancy. Just good eggs, fresh bread, coffee we ground ourselves. The plates didn't match. The flowers were from the little yard garden I'd been tending with more intention since spring. There was no seating chart, no hierarchy, no one trying to audition for affection. Just Miles, Tanya, Chase, and me. Laughing, passing butter, talking about books and movies and how to grow tomatoes in clay soil. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was pretending to belong. I thought about the old table, the one at Dolores's house. Polished wood, spotless napkins, and an invisible scoreboard where every comment had a price. I didn't want to sit there again, but I also didn't want anyone else to suffer trying to. I hoped they'd find their way out too, even if I'd never be the one guiding them. That afternoon, the mail came. Among the circulars and bank statements was a single card. Heavy envelope, cream paper, handwriting I knew by heart. I held it a moment. Then, without opening it, I slipped it into the back of the drawer where I keep things I'm not quite ready to throw away, but don't need on display. I turned back to the window, took a deep breath, and whispered to the glass. I didn't leave the family. I just stopped auditioning for a seat. Some stories don't end with a door slammed shut. They end with a quiet turning of the knob and a choice not to walk back through. I didn't burn bridges. I simply stopped crossing ones that always led me back to hurt. If you're watching this and you've ever felt erased in your own family, I see you. If you've ever swallowed your truth to keep the peace or dimmed your joy to fit a script, you're not alone. You don't need permission to choose peace over performance. The table you build for yourself can be the most sacred space of all. It doesn't need to be big. It just needs to be yours. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever walked away from something that no longer saw your worth? Or maybe you're still sitting at a table that was never meant for you. Share your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk. Let's connect. If this story touched something in you, drop a 1 in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. And hey, if it didn't resonate, that's okay too. Let me know why. Your voice matters here. And if you want more real, raw, and healing stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. This table, it's open for you. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next story.